United States launched launched Tomahawk cruise missiles into Syrian air bases yesterday. Brad Melke with ABC News is in New York. Good morning, Brad Melke.
Hey, good morning.
So, congressional reaction to President Trump's call. What is it?
Well, you're hearing a lot from Republicans really applauding the move. You're actually hearing quite a few moderate Democrats saying the president's well within his rights to do this, and they're actually encouraged by this move. I think the fact that this was a strong but targeted strike is putting a lot of people at ease. This does not smack to a lot of congressmen as necessarily getting embroiled in a war or anything like that. However, you do have dissenters. On the right, you have the libertarian wing saying there should have been a congressional authorization here, that it should be the president going to Congress. And on the left, not so much of that, actually. Instead, what you have is a lot of people bringing up refugees. The idea that if the U.S. is going to be involved in bombing campaigns in Syria, that if we're finally sort of giving, sort of recognition to the hundreds of thousands that have died and been displaced there, that we should be upping the number of refugees we take, not lowering it. So that's sort of the array of reactions you're getting from Capitol Hill.
What about international reaction? Anything coming in from overseas?
Well, I mean, Russia obviously is sort of right in the middle of all of this, since they are allies with the Syrian government. They have been flying missions, what they call anti-terror missions within Syria, and they immediately condemned this attack. They said this was aggression. They said it was illegal under certain international statutes. They are calling for an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council today. But what's interesting is kind of contrasting signals here. They're also saying Bashar al-Assad is not indispensable as the leader of Syria. They're kind of saying, hey, we're not arm in arm with Assad here, and they're still going to welcome Rex Tillerson to Moscow next week for a diplomatic meeting. So it's a very interesting, very tricky situation right now. Meanwhile, a lot of the traditional alliances you'd expect for the U.S. are actually seeming like they're stronger than ever, right? When you hear about Israel, Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, Qatar, and then even the U.K. and Germany and France all sort of standing behind the U.S. saying this is the right thing to do.
Brad, earlier in the week, the Trump administration singled that Syria was their own problem, not our problem, and there's a new America First philosophy. How does that square with this bombing? Is we no longer America First? Are we much more internationalist now after this gas attack?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's one that President Trump's own speechwriters were clearly looking at last night when he spelled out in that brief statement. He did spell out the rationale. He said this is of vital national security interests to the United States. So he talked about the humanitarian angle. He talked about how people had the lives choked out of them by Bashar al-Assad. But the reason we fired those 50-something Tomahawk missiles was not because of that. He said it's because we are essentially preventing terrorism and not even preventing terrorism, preventing the scourge of these illegal attacks by countries like Syria, preventing the spread of chemical weapons.
Does this stop? Does anybody think that this stops Assad from doing this again?
No. I mean, not for now. Not with this particular strike. This hinders Bashar al-Assad. We actually just spoke to Marco Rubio about this, and he said it certainly was the right step, he says, in terms of taking out some of the very aircraft that perpetrated this horrific attack. It downgrades the capabilities of the Syrian air forces, but it does nothing to stop their army from rolling into towns and taking out civilian populations. It does nothing to get Bashar al-Assad out of power. That would take further strikes, and it's still to be seen if what President Trump wants to pursue anything, if he wants to pursue more of this.
Brad Melke, ABC News correspondent in New York. Brad, thanks for checking in.
Thank you.
6:56.